Good evening. Welcome to the June 21st edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. Whether you're here with us tonight or watching home on TV, we're glad you're with us. As is our custom, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit, Commissioner Colavani,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
All right, thank you. We made a few adjustments to our meeting process in hopes of better serving those both in attendance and watching at home. As always, public comment will be part of each active or first reading agenda item, and public comments not specific to an agenda item have been moved to a point later in the meeting with the mayor and council member reports. Moving on to item 3, is there a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the June 14, 2022 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council about those minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That too passes unanimously. Just like that, we're moving through our meeting. We're about to come up to our active agenda portion of the meeting, but first, will have some public comments opportunities coming. And that portion of these meetings on agenda items or on the non-agenda items are opportunities to address your council. Please remember, it's not a debate, nor is it an open question and answer session. It is simply an opportunity to speak to the council. We have a variety of additional opportunities to engage council members, including our e-remark system, the CRC system, coffee with the council, direct email, or by phone. And every one of your council members spends time in person off this dais making themselves available to residents and businesses alike. The public comments agenda item and public comments portion of each specific agenda item are intentional parts of structured meeting. As such, we do have some expectations on how they're to be handled. Please state your name for the record, keep comments to 5 minutes or less, avoid repeating what others have already said. Please keep your comments to one visit to the podium per subject. If you forget to mention something or additional conversation brings up a new idea, please hold that until after the meeting and use one of the other methods to contact us as needed, or bring that item and that idea to our next meeting. That takes us to item 5, our active agenda. Is there a motion concerning Chapter 14?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 14 of the Municipal Code as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the audience on amendments to Chapter 14?
David Rose. And I apologize ahead of time if I'm somewhat off topic, but given that this deals with traffic, I wanted to make some what I hope are perceived as relevant comments to the theme. Part of my comment relates to the discussion last week about safety concerns associated with the modifications of traffic pattern by the North High School, and my calling attention to the issue of the bicycling. I wanted to extend that further by suggesting that in light of what's going on with respect to gasoline prices and patterns we're already seeing with regard to various kinds of motorized transportation happening within the village, that I would like the village to consider undertaking some kind of examination of its regulations about where and when all types of vehicles are allowed to operate within the village. I say that in part because of my observing that we have motorized traffic, motorized vehicles on sidewalks in some cases. We have motorized vehicles on streets in some cases that are being ridden by children, could be ridden by people going to the schools if we get more of that in the future. Things of that sort. And bicycle lanes may or may not work in that situation because of the difference in speed that can be obtained by such vehicles. So I wanted to bring that up in conjunction with this whole theme of traffic. Secondly, I wanted to also mention about the assumption that was made that growth is part of what needs to be built into an expectation regarding traffic. Again, because of my concern about environmental sustainability, I question whether that's an appropriate assumption going forward, particularly as it affects suburbs, and would encourage you to reassess whether that should be an assumption built into studies that are done of that sort. Also wanted to remark, thirdly, on the whole subject of speeding and the enforcement of speeding in the village. Because of the debate we've been having, discussion we've been having regarding Forest Avenue and other places within the village. I think I mentioned that there's a concern on enforcement that fines don't necessarily deter speeding. And I, subsequent to that discussion, became aware of the idea that, at least in certain parts of the world, fines are not minimal, as seems to be the case for people who have substantial incomes and can basically view a fine as just the cost of operating if they want to break the speed limit, as opposed to having a fine that actually has a deterring effect. So I wanted to make you aware of that concept and encourage you to explore it. And lastly, unfortunately for personal reasons, I wanted to call attention to a new issue regarding Forest Avenue. In that 2 days ago in the evening, I had a close encounter of the unfortunate kind that if it had been seconds differently, I would not be standing here in front of you. I would either be hospitalized or deceased. I refer specifically to the fact that Forest Avenue, as you, I suspect, know if you've gone in that area, if you're heading south to cross over the tracks, is a blind view coming toward you. Well, I had the unfortunate experience of having, as I'm heading up over the tracks, southbound, someone coming northbound in a white pickup, where if the situation had been slightly different, where I had been not as many seconds away from this individual as they're crossing over the tracks, and I use the term individual, whereas if I'm more accurate, I would probably say a jackass in a white pickup truck, was coming northbound in the southbound lane, heading straight toward me. Thankfully, that individual missed me by going into the southbound lane adjacent to me so that they passed by me to continue on heading northbound on Forest. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, because in a million years, I never thought that the kind of accident which I imagined from what reading and hearing was not uncommon as the reason for a serious or deadly accident in a rural area where the lightness of traffic volume encourages people not to stay on their side of the road, that we would have such a situation in Downers Grove at Forest Avenue at the tracks. Similarly, I never would have thought we would have had an accident resulting in the death of a high school student in front of North High School. So I hope whoever that jackass in the white pickup truck was, that they will not decide to do what they did again, and that I hope by calling this to your attention that everyone in the village will be aware of this possibility. Both those people who are heading southbound on Forest at that location, and anyone coming northbound, I hope they will recognize the appropriateness of staying in the northbound side and not deciding that, well, it's a little bit straighter shot to go on the southbound side and there's not going to be any traffic, but when you can't see the traffic on the other side, which you can't, that's what happens. Thank you for listening.
Any other comments on this agenda item? Comments or questions from the council? Okay, none. Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Cullivaney?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning facilities replacement sustainability plan?
Mayor, I move to approve the design development plans for the facilities replacement and sustainability plan and direct staff to pursue option number 1.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the audience on this agenda item?
Hi, Sarah DePascal. Just I guess clarification point on the option 1 design. Would the updated fencing come all the way down to the east end corner of the property line there? Right now, it kind of shows it stopping behind, is it 704, the Olson's property, instead of extending all the way down to the end corner?
I'm not sure that it's completely sorted out. I think right now the intention is to put fencing up along that right-of-way somewhere.
Yes, there would be continuous fencing, even though that
Okay.
may not be exactly shown. That
Yeah.
was meant to be a conceptual drawing, but yes, the
Understood.
fencing would be.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sarah, before you go on, that for both you and anybody else watching at home,
Yeah.
what we're talking about here tonight are still very much design concept drawings. And so
Okay.
what's important to take away from this as it relates to the area you're talking about is the addition of extra efforts at different types of vegetation along that area.
Yep. And then I guess with the proposed approval of option 1 versus 2, can anyone, I guess, discuss the benefits and cons and benefits between the two?
We'll have some additional conversation.
Okay.
Rather than repeat my ongoing concern about the continuing use of the term sustainability in this context, I just wanted to be specific about one aspect of the use of that term as it applies to the claim that the building to be built is going to result in a 30% reduction of energy consumption. Per my concern about the way in which you use that term sustainability, I would just remind again that because of your intentions to sell property to put up a building that's going to be consuming energy, that whatever reduction you get in the consumption of energy of the village's facility will be at least partially, if not completely, offset by whatever you're allowing to be built in order to pay for the new facility.
Any other comments from the audience on this item? Okay, comments or questions from the council? Greg, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I missed last week's meeting, so I want to thank my colleagues for their discussion of this particular item. And I want to say that I absolutely love the revised drawings that we've seen from the design team. I think they captured everything that the council had discussed. I love it, and I just can't wait to see the building, in live and in color, as they say, and not just on a page. It's going to be fun to watch it go up. With regard to options 1 versus 2 on the tree planting for additional screening, for me, it's a matter of option 1 has us planting trees on village property, and option 2 has us planting trees on private property. And I would much rather the village, the public entity, plant trees on its own property as opposed to on private property. I think it creates concerns with regard to who's going to, keep the tree, maintain the tree, that are avoided if it's on our property. It's our responsibility, and it's clear as day. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments or questions on this one? Rich, please.
Yeah, I was pleased that staff was able to carve out a 20-foot swath there, because I was under the impression before we wouldn't have enough room. And with my conversations, I'm convinced that we're going to be able to put the best possible screening vegetation there. So pleased that we're able to do that and still be able to turn a fire truck around in that space.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Chris,
I
please.
just add, again, appreciation for the thought that went into the options. I think this demonstrates that we are looking for ways to be a better neighbor. And so I think I will also support option one. I think it's the right reasons, as Commissioner Jose outlined. I also want to thank staff for going back, adding the extra door in the council chambers. That was smart thinking, I think, came from one of our residents, and I think that's a good add. And I am too excited to see this project move forward and happy to see it on schedule so far. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I'll just add that the screening issue, which is one of the changes from the last time that we've looked at this, is really just an attempt by the village to improve the amount of screening that is done overall. Hopefully it will grow over time. As you all know, whether it's the tower or it's the garage activities, it's an area that people would rather not be looking at. And so this is just sort of a further attempt. We had initially talked about some fencing. Fencing, of course, is fixed in height, not terribly green, and so this is an attempt at trying to add to that by creating an environment that eventually, when it grows in, will provide a better, more intentional buffer between the village activities in that corner of our lot and the neighbors that back up to it. There is no perfect screen when you're dealing with a maintenance garage. That's just the fact. But I'm glad that we're able to take a little additional village property and dedicate it towards efforts at trying to screen stuff off better. So, anyone else?
Mayor, just really quickly,
Please.
I just also wanted to point out that if we were to do option one, that accommodates larger trees as well, which I really think helps meet the goal of us to help meet the goal of the residents. So I appreciate option one. Thank you to staff for also noting on here that this is not going to negatively impact the use of the lot. I know we talked about vehicles and being able to maneuver. So I really feel like option one kind of hits all of the key things that we were looking for here on council in order to better assist the residents. So I'm looking forward to seeing this happen, seeing the facility in living color, as Commissioner Jose said, and continue to appreciate all of the work that staff is doing. So thank you.
Okay, Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That too passes unanimously. That takes us to item 6 on our agenda, our first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we either begin to discuss or continue to discuss items on which we do not plan to take action tonight. These are just conversational in nature and discussionary, so with that, I'll hand it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There are 2 items on tonight's first reading agenda. Both have to do with further expansion of our valued business partner, Poogie. Here to present background information on these 2 items is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. The first item up is a special use for an automobile dealership at 2424 Ogden Avenue. The property is on the far west end of Ogden Avenue, shown here within the circle. And then if we zoom in a little bit, it's specifically at the northeast corner of Cross Street and Ogden Avenue. The property consists of multiple lots of records and was previously housed Max Matson dealership. A petitioner is proposing in their site plan to construct a new facility on the site, which will house a showroom, service area, and other ancillary automobile uses. You can see the parking lot surrounds the building, which will be used for staff parking, customers, display vehicles, service vehicles, and anybody coming to visit the site. The 2 existing curb cuts, one on Ogden and one on Cross, will remain in place and provide access around the building. That'll provide access for any emergency vehicles that have to get around there as well, car deliveries and services if anybody needs a service here at the new dealership at this location. Petitioner will be installing a sidewalk along Ogden Avenue. There's an existing sidewalk on Cross Street that will remain, and the petitioner will be providing pedestrian connections from the front entrance to both Ogden and Cross Street as well. There is an existing detention basin and some stormwater vaults that are in the parking lot here shown in blue. The petitioner is proposing to maintain those, which will accommodate the stormwater that's required and will meet the stormwater management ordinance of the village as well. If we look at the renderings, the top rendering is the south elevation. So the blue is principally glass, so a lot of glass on this facility. And then on the west elevation as well, it'll be principal glass as well. Those are the two prime facades. The south one faces Ogden, west one faces Cross Street. As mentioned earlier, there's 6 lots of record. The petitioner will consolidate those lots administratively pass after approvals. With regard to the comprehensive plan, the site is identified as corridor commercial, automobile-related uses, looking to serve the local residents and the regional residents. And then the proposal does beautify Ogden and improves pedestrian connectivity. The Planning Commission considered the petition at their June 6th meeting and found that the standards for approval for a special use were met, and they recommended approval of the petition. I'd be happy to answer any questions for Mayor and Council, and we also have Gary Middleman here with Poogie as well, that he'd be able to answer any questions as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Stan. Any comments or questions from the audience? And you're welcome to say something if you'd like. You don't have to. Any of you got in the audience with any questions about this? Okay, comment, Council. Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Poogie for expanding their business here in Downers Grove. This is a site that's been vacant for longer than we would have liked, for sure, and it's going to be great to see a new building and a new dealership up there. So, thank you for continuing to invest in Downers Grove. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rich.
Yeah, I echo those comments. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I think this is also a good investment on our side, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes.
Just from an administrative standpoint, for anybody watching at home, a special use, this is a special use. It is also, in this instance, a special use on a site that previously was operating with the same special use. So impacts are minimal, which is certainly part of why there's less discussion up here. So with that, let's move on, Stan.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item is a sales tax rebate agreement with Poogie of Chicagoland. As identified in the manager's memo and the agreement, there are responsibilities of both Poogie and the village. So Poogie will be required to complete the construction by October 31st of 23 and operate a dealership there for 15 years. Should the dealership cease to exist for that time, there's a reimbursement schedule identified in the redevelopment agreement, or the rebate agreement. The village will be rebating 50% of municipal sales taxes for 10 years, and per the agreement, we'll be holding back 25% of the most current rebate payment. That's my brief presentation on this item, Mayor. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer those for you as well.
Thank you, Stan. Any comments or questions from the audience?
As you might guess, since I've commented on this previously, I'll just reiterate some of what I've said in the past. Couple of things. The language in the documentation provided as part of this discussion indicates that the EDC recommends. I'm not sure at this point what is to be made of that phrase, given that the membership of the EDC, as far as I can tell, is substantially comprised of members of the village council. So it's not as if recommending to yourself that this is a great idea is exactly an independent recommendation. Secondly, I've discussed this previously. I hope that this agreement has stronger holdback protections than previous such agreements. I concede in this case, since Poogie has a variety of dealerships here, there's not as much risk, but nevertheless, I would like to see the village start using actual holdback protections that have some teeth to it compared to the ones that have been used. Thirdly, I would point out that the investment in the community on the part of any business getting rebates is in fact being subsidized by these rebates. So I think it would be helpful from the residents' perspective to learn, if the village were willing to work with this idea, of exactly what kind of investment is being made on the part of the enterprise versus what kind of investment is being made on the part of the village. In that regard, I would say that it would be helpful to do two things: to identify what reasonable terms are in such agreements compared to what might be pejoratively known as crony capitalism. And along that line, that the reporting of these kinds of agreements would be helpful to inform the village, both in individual cases and in total, what the impact of such rebates are, amounts for that are at issue, and the consequences of that in terms of the taxes that are being generated versus not being generated by enterprises and have to be made up for by private individuals through other sources of tax.
Any other comments from the audience? Council comments or questions? Greg, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Every once in a while, we get some commentary on sales tax rebate agreements, and I think it's useful to talk a little bit about the history and use of them. We don't have to like them, but the reality is that every other community is using them as well. And whether it's Poogie or any other dealership, they could locate in Downers Grove or they could locate someplace else. And chances are there's another municipality not that far away that would give them a sales tax rebate agreement, much like what we're looking at here. The fact of that is that we could have all of the sales tax revenue that comes from the associated businesses, most of the car dealerships on Ogden Avenue, or we could not. And as Mayor Tully used to say, 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. So I will take the 50% all day long, knowing that Poogie has done a tremendous amount of business here in Downers Grove and will continue to. And I think this dealership is going to be a success as well. And I'd just like to note that the EDC membership, I mean, the board itself is made up largely of folks from private industry. The village has seats on the board, to be sure, but we don't even come close to a majority, let alone anything else. So we can talk about the EDC and whether you like it, whether you don't, but want to make sure we got the facts on all that straight. Thank you, Mayor.
Other council comments or questions? Chris, please.
Thank you. This sales tax rebate agreement is in line with other ones that we've had with Poogie, right? Basically the same thing we've been doing for a long time.
This is a standard format agreement that was developed about 12 years ago. We had previous standard agreements. This was the last major revision, so it matches all the ones we've done in the last 10 years or so.
Excellent. And the amounts we rebate is transparent every year. We report that out to our residents. They're well aware of what the rebates are, what the value of that is to us and to Poogie.
Yes, they're reported in the aggregate in the sales tax rebate fund, which is accounted for separately for this very reason, for transparency purposes for the public. It's found in our budget book.
That's great. I fully support this and also welcome additional investment from Poogie. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I agree with that. Any sales tax revenue we get out of this site is totally incremental because we've received exactly zero for X number of years. Poogie is a well-respected part of our community and business we're actually pleased and proud to have here. And we look forward to this current success or the new success that you'll get with this dealership. Wish you all the best with it.
What else? Council comments? Let me just add a little additional clarity here. As Rich said, and Greg quoted Mayor Tully in the past, this property has been generating $0 in sales tax, so the additional revenue to the village is most welcome. I'm frankly thrilled that somebody wants to invest in that parcel and help us keep it profitably helping the village of Downers Grove. That's the truth of the matter. Every one of these nickels is a nickel we would not have had as a big boon to the village residents of Downers Grove. There's a lot of things said, and sometimes it's a challenge to keep up with them. So we're just going to clarify a little bit who the EDC board really is. There's probably not a lot of folks who don't know this, but for those that don't, the board is not largely the people sitting up here. The board does include Greg and I. It also includes Dave and Mike, so I guess there is some commingling, so to speak. But it also includes folks from Latham & Watkins, Flavor Chem, Community Bank of Downers Grove, Ziegler Automotive, The Park District, District 58, District 99, Adelman Global Education, DuPage County Board, Jones Lang LaSalle, Hamilton Partners, Doubletree Suites, Phillip Law Office, Inland Real Estate. Our 48th District Representative, Tara Costa Howard, is part of this board as well. It's Schultz Properties, ComEd, Downers Grove Sanitary District, Stein Hoffels, Midwestern University, the Alter Group, Regions Bank, and Good Samaritan Hospital. It is a list of folks who care deeply and are heavily invested in the village of Downers Grove. We rely highly on them for their expertise and also as a bit of a think tank to help us decide, are these types of agreements and other types of incentive packages that might be put together helpful in the net to the residents of Downers Grove or not? Another thing, just for some perspective, is about half of those people on that list are also residents of Downers Grove. They are just like everybody sitting up here and everybody watching at home. They benefit as residential property taxpayers from the Economic Development Corporation's efforts. The truth of the matter is the Economic Development Corporation has been a huge success for the village of Downers Grove for its 15-plus years now of existence. Continues to be a super important part of not only how we sustain ourselves, but how we grow and how we manage our finances and how we keep costs down for residents. So I welcome their input. I'm thankful for it every time we get it, and I'm thankful that they're helping us put these kinds of packages together. So with that, Rosa, would you please call the roll?
We're not taking a vote.
Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I got so excited about a deal. Thank you guys for continuing to invest in the village of Downers Grove. It is something, frankly, that excites me. I guess I need to apologize for getting so excited, but the truth of the matter is that might be police, fire, and public works are the things we all tell everybody we do, but the village of Downers Grove average resident pays less than a third of the cost of doing that work in their property taxes. This is a huge deal. So when you see me get excited about economic development opportunities and economic development things, or perhaps even a little defenses of them sometimes, that's why. Because frankly, it funds what we're doing here. It makes this village so much more manageable for residents to live in, to raise their kids in, for seniors who struggle and with increasing costs and increasing taxes. The village of Downers Grove maintains one of the bottom 5 corporate tax rates in the county of DuPage, and our economic work is a big part of why. So a little mea culpa for jumping ahead to what hopefully will be in the future, but that's why I get pretty excited about it. Sorry about that, guys.
It's good practice for our next meeting.
Yeah, well, hopefully I won't have to repeat it, and everybody will understand where that is. So I think that's the last thing on our
Correct, Mayor.
first reading. So Dave, manager's report.
Great segue, Mayor, right into the 2021 to 2023 long-range plan update. We are very pleased to start the LRP update process tonight. Tonight's presentation will go through the 5 topics. We'll start with an overview and introduction of the LRP process itself. We'll talk about the meeting schedule for the update. We'll review our strategic goals, focus tonight on general fund sustainability from a financial standpoint, and then, of course, if there's any council questions or comments and discussion. The 21 to 23 long-range plan, approved by the Village Council last September, identifies and addresses issues affecting the long-term future of the village. The plan establishes the village's goals and priority actions that guide our annual budgets, our daily operations, and our delivery of services. The plan consists of the things you see here on the screen: our goals, trends and issues, strategies and solutions to address those issues, and the council's work plan while this council is seated. This graphic compares the role of the village council and the role of the village staff with an airline flight. And the point of this discussion and use of this graphic is the long-range planning process. We're really at a high altitude in our analogy, 30 to 40,000 feet, talking about goals and work plans. And there are many opportunities as we go through other agenda items throughout the year to get down into the 20 and 10,000 foot level, including annual budgets, which will start up again this September. As for our annual update, we plan 3 meetings to update our long-range plan. We'll start tonight. Then we'll do a meeting in July where we will talk about the water fund and the parking fund. And then in August, we'll just go through an update on our priority action items and see if the council would like to make any adjustments to your work plan. Here are the goals that were identified by this council in the long-range planning sessions from last year. I won't go through all of them. 5 of them have been long-standing goals that were approved and reapproved by multiple iterations of the Village Council. This council added the goal of a safe community, which has driven a lot of our work in areas like public safety, police and fire, and particularly in vehicular and pedestrian traffic work that we've undertaken over the last several months. I wanted to focus tonight's conversation, really a presentation on our general fund and its financial sustainability. It is the village's main operating fund, and most village services are accounted for in this fund. And because the village is a service organization, the vast majority of our costs are related to the people delivering those services. Financial sustainability has been a long-standing village goal. The goal has been achieved in the general fund with revenues exceeding expenses each year for the past 12 years. In fact, in the Great Recession, FY09, that was the last time that expenses exceeded revenues in our operating fund. So the village staff has identified 3 key issues that you see here on the slide. First is good news. We project that revenues and expenses in this fund will be aligned for the balance of this year and into FY23, so for next year's budgeting purposes. As we talked about in the past couple of months and other financial updates, revenues increased significantly last year and are projected in our models to increase at a very modest 1.5% for the balance of this year and into next year. Well, expenses, as everybody knows, in this inflationary time, are increasing, and we expect that they will increase by about 10% during this calendar year, and we're projecting another 4.5% annual growth rate or inflationary rate in 2023. And that follows up on a 6% increase that we saw in expenses in 2021. So we're definitely seeing the effects of the inflation in our general fund. But I just want to, I'll show you in a graph here in a second. The good news here is that the revenues were so strong in the previous year and continue to grow modestly that we think will be aligned or balanced for the balance of this year and next year. As we talk about each year with long-range planning, the required contributions to public safety pensions are projected to continue to increase every year for the next 18 years. We're on a schedule to bring those 2 funds, our police pension fund and fire pension fund, to a 100% funded status by 2040. And related to the inflationary effects, the village also continues to feel the effects of global supply chain disruptions. We'll talk a little bit about that later as we talk about our parking fund, our fleet fund, and our equipment replacement fund. The general fund does support these funds. Those funds are experiencing significant inflation and supply chain issues. Here's the graph I was mentioning just a minute ago. The top line is in blue and shows revenue. You can see the significant increase in 2021 by strong performance in sales tax, including the collection of online sales tax for the first time. That's when the new law went in at the state level. So significant increases in revenue driven by sales tax, particularly online sales tax. Again, we suspect, as you can see in this graph, just very modest growth in revenues in 2022 and 2023. We will continue to monitor, obviously, the ever-changing economy to see how changes in interest rates and the general economy will affect our revenues. If we see anything that would cause us to deviate from this graph, we will come back to the council for a public updating conversation. The red line shows expenses. As I mentioned earlier, you can see that 6% increase in 2021, and then a projected 10% increase for 2022, and then 4.5% increase in 2023. And you can see why we say they're aligned. You can see those 2 lines are projected to meet with the 2023 budget. Just wanted to reiterate again on the expense side that the general fund supports the equipment replacement fund, the fleet fund, and the parking fund. Expenses in all of those funds are rising quickly beyond our original budget. So here are the strategies and solutions that we've identified to address those key trends and issues. We always implement cost control measures. It's in the DNA of your staff and the council as well. We're always looking for ways to keep costs down. This one, the next bullet point here, we will continue to monitor the supply chain issues. We're having to be very flexible in how and when we purchase things like vehicles, and we had a couple of agenda items like that in the last few months. We will continue to maintain our reserve balances at their recommended level. And one of the other policies that's been long-standing with this village council and previous councils is to continue to pay for the costs of required contributions to public safety pensions through the property tax levy. So goes the required contributions, so goes the levy for our community. And then the one that this council added a couple of years ago, or I guess it was last year, to consider increasing property tax levy for operations only as necessary. That's a brief overview of the general fund and what we see coming for the balance of this year and next year. We're happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Dave. Any comments or questions from the audience on this item?
Couple of questions, I guess. First of all, on page 8, in Mr. Fieldman's remarks about support for the parking fund, I guess I personally would welcome some more specific description of what exactly is being referred to there as the need for support and the rising costs. Also on page 8, I'm not clear. The very last sentence of the last paragraph on that page is, to me, unintelligible, and I don't know if that's because of punctuation missing or words missing, or I just don't understand what's trying to be said there. So I would appreciate, both for myself and anyone else who bothers to read this stuff, to actually have some clarification on that last sentence on the last paragraph on page 8. More importantly, though, I wanted to mention again, as I have repeatedly in the past, said that my concern remains regarding what the impact of pension responsibilities is going to be in the long-range plan. And I guess I had one question and a couple of questions, I'll say. One concerns the graph and the depiction of the contribution by the personnel, both the fire and the police. And is the scale of the graph such that it's not visually able to reflect rising contributions, or in fact, is there not a rising contribution on the part of those personnel? And if so, is that because there's a fixed number that they're supposed to be providing, or is it a percentage amount that they're contributing, which is just not being captured graphically? My other concern, as I've raised before, is that I fear, both because of what I read and also because of the requirements that apply to how pensions are handled in states like Illinois, that residents of Illinois, both in Downers Grove and elsewhere, are facing a rise that I think should be specified more precisely, if at all possible, rather than leave it generic or vague like it seems to be now. We've already seen the market fall in these last few days substantially. I assume that translates into recalculation of return on investment for something like public pension funds and all pension funds for that matter. So if that's going to translate into an increased obligation on the part of what property taxes are to bear, as I've asked before, I would welcome seeing some sort of scenarios that capture that information more precisely than is the case right now. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the audience? Comments or questions from the dais? None? I got a list, Dave, but I'm going to send a package of questions. It's going to make more sense than trying to answer them here anyway. It is a long-standing process for this council and councils before to go through this LRP process. So please, if you're here tonight or if you're at home, keep your eyes open for long-range planning LRP commentary as it appears in agendas. It is an ongoing process that eventually feeds both priority action items, in other words, the work plan for 2023 and beyond, as well as budgeting for 2023, which at the end of it all results in a tax levy. So it is a sort of a continuous process that has lots of opportunities for input, lots of opportunities for commentary, and we welcome them all. But it has started, so please know that, and keep your eyes peeled and in tune to what we're doing up here. Okay, with that,
That ends our manager's report, Mayor. I look forward to next month's discussion where we'll get into some detail of what's happening in the parking fund on both the revenue and expense side. Thank you.
thank you. Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance approving a special use to allow a personal vehicle sales business at 2424 Ogden. And the second is an ordinance approving a sales tax rebate agreement between the Village of Downers Grove and Downers Grove Imports. Both will be on the July 5th active agenda.
Thank you. Item 9, public comments. This is the portion of the meeting where we're entertaining public comments on items not on tonight's agenda. If you have something else you want to add, please come on down to the podium.
Something else I want to add, all right. David Rose, one last time tonight. Several things, and pardon me if it feels like it's a grab bag. So let me start by mentioning some items on the consent agenda, partly because of my concern about my personal lack of clarity about how items get put on the consent agenda versus not. One, for example, the fitness contract, I noticed in reading that the cost doubled. I have no idea why. It's not a lot of money, I guess one could say, but it would, what I would welcome in situations like that, some sort of clarification. The item regarding the grant from the stormwater management, I guess I was struck to wonder if that grant weren't there, whether the village would undertake that project. I was also intrigued by the school guard crossing item in the sense that it's on the agenda because there's a shortage of school guard crossing people, and it's not clear to me why having Andy Frayne get involved is going to change that situation or not. I'd also like to go back to the discussion for a moment regarding my comments on the rebate. I guess one of my concerns in talking about the village's impact there is that you're providing most of the money. So even if you have less than a majority of the board members, when you're providing the bulk of the money, I assume that has an impact on your influence. And there are some other concerns that I've mentioned in the past, all of which have been a source of disagreement here. But I originally wanted to come up and talk about the fact that in response to my comment last week, this provides the only opportunity I have to comment on your response to my comment about the contract regarding the trash pickup, and my concern that it reflects the ongoing difference in my understanding versus what environmental sustainability is versus your understanding of what environmental sustainability entails. And the comments that were made by the people who commented in response to my comments reflected that contrast, that you see it as strictly negotiating a new contract, whereas I was trying to suggest that given that one of the goals of that contract was enunciated as reducing waste, that if you're actually serious about environmental sustainability, that should be the primary purpose of what you're trying to accomplish, of which the contract is a part. And in order to actually accomplish that, you need to engage the village, not view it simply as negotiating a contract, because at this point, it's not clear to me what you're going to do within the contract that stimulates residents to consume less. And as I've been commenting endlessly here, that's the part of the problem now, if you actually understand environmental sustainability properly, that it's a consumption issue. It's a rate of consumption of resources issue. And if you're producing trash and your rates on the trash pickup, like is represented by the size of the container, encourage people to pay less the more trash they expend, then to me that's not encouraging reduced consumption. I also would include as part of that point that some of the other comments made, such as technology as a solution, is also a misunderstanding of what needs to be done with respect to environmental sustainability. One of the things that was mentioned in talking about the rebate agreements that pertains here also is that it's the idea that each village is using a rebate agreement, to me, should suggest that maybe we start cooperating on a community-wide basis or on a county-wide basis or on a statewide basis so that you don't have competition. That applies equally well in this context as well, meaning how do we, in general, reduce consumption if you're going to encourage people to buy stuff, cars, furniture, etc., and you're not going to divide the revenues up, the tax revenues up in such a way that discourages consumption. There are also some other kinds of ideas that are not being investigated.
Hey, Dave, that's 5.
This whole idea.
Dave, it's 5. Please wrap it up.
All right. And lastly, I would just say that I was disappointed that you went from first having what I thought was no first reading, but just the discussion in the committee room, to voting on that item on the active agenda. It no longer is clear to me what the purpose of public discussion is on the days when you have gone from first reading to voting on the active agenda. Because I look back at what happens in public comments of the active agenda, and I'm hard-pressed to recall any instance where an item on the active agenda, in light of public comment, actually resulted in a different vote. Thanks.
Others with subjects not on tonight's agenda. Okay. That takes us to our mayor's report. I have no report tonight. Item 11 is council member reports. Any council members want to report on goings-on in the community, other entities they're working with or associated with? There are some things going on, I think. Danny, you got anything?
I have no report. Thank you, Mayor.
Chris?
No report, thank you.
Greg?
Real quick, Mayor, thank you. Wanted to remind folks that there is a primary election going on. Early voting is taking place in our committee room right over here through Saturday, June the 25th. Hours during the week are 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturday 9 to 5. So come out and exercise the franchise. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Rich?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Nicole?
The week and weekend are finally here. I'm going to knock on wood. There is currently no rain in the forecast. One extra knock just for good measure. Please come out to Rotary Grove Fest Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this weekend. If you're looking for specific hours, you can find those on rotarygrovefest.com. All of our proceeds go right back into the community through a variety of different scholarships and donations. So come out, have a good time, have a drink, let your kids ride on the rides, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all for a good cause. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.